She doesn't notice when you try to please, but she never forgets when you disappear. This is the hook, and it's also the beginning of the end for every man who still believes love is enough. And the truth is, most don't even realize their mistake until it's too late. That's when they've already given everything, said everything, given themselves completely, and still, they've been forgotten. Most men are born believing they must win a woman over with flowers, gestures, compliments, constant messages, declarations, and presents. From a young age, we learn that love is earned through visible effort, through uninterrupted self-giving, through romantic gestures. But what no one tells us is that excessive presence destroys mystery. And where there is no mystery, there is no magnetism. Where there is no magnetism, desire dies. And of course, it works for a while. She's enchanted, she smiles, she gets involved. But everything predictable becomes scenery, and the scenery goes unnoticed. What was once a beautiful gesture becomes routine, and routine in the female heart kills impact. And what lacks impact is forgotten. And when this happens, he doesn't understand. He wonders what he did wrong. He responds faster, tries harder, offers more affection, gives himself even more intensely. But the more he offers, the more she distances herself. And that's when the downfall begins. He thinks he's losing because it wasn't enough. But the truth is even crueler. He's losing because it was too easy, too available, too predictable. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. And although he spoke of politics, what he revealed about power perfectly applies to the human heart. When he wrote, "It is far safer to be feared than loved," he wasn't encouraging cruelty. He was pointing out a silent truth that few have the courage to face. Excessive love without respect becomes routine, and everything that is routine loses its emotional impact. Love offered without criteria becomes a background noise, always present, but rarely heard. Pay close attention. Every woman has forgotten a kind man, but no woman forgets the man she couldn't control. No woman forgets the feeling of absence of someone who silently imposed a limit she never expected. Because what she feels isn't anger, it's discomfort, an unanswered question, an emptiness that screams in the silence, a sharp cut in the emotional narrative she thought she mastered. The common man seeks to conquer. The rare man disappears with dignity when his presence is underestimated. And it is precisely in this absence that true obsession is born. Because the human brain is attracted to what it cannot control, to what is unavailable, to what creates space for imagination. Real absence opens space for idealization. And nothing is more addictive than what has not been clearly concluded. She doesn't want a man who begs for love. She wants a man who knows the value of his own presence. And that value is only realized when he's absent. Because what is rare is precious. And what is precious cannot be given away for free. You can be kind, affectionate, caring, loyal. But if all of this is given without criteria, it loses its power. What is offered without risk, without pause, without scarcity, is interpreted as too available to be valuable. And her mind, trained from an early age to protect itself, rejects anything that doesn't require emotional effort. Machiavelli taught that in politics, authority is not born of kindness, but of the perception of power. In relationships, it's the same. You're not respected for what you offer. You're respected for the line you don't allow yourself to be crossed, for your ability to leave without warning, without drama, without a scene. When that line is disrespected, the man who knows when to leave imposes a silent value, because he shows, without saying anything, that he loves himself more than he needs to be loved. The absence of a man with boundaries is worth more than 1,000 messages from an insecure man, because she feels the contrast. She feels the impact. She feels something has been lost, and perhaps it cannot be recovered. This perhaps is what holds her back. It's not the presence that wins her over. It's the risk of losing her forever that awakens the most emotional part of her mind. Every woman has heard these declarations. Few have been left silent by a man who made her feel, in a single gesture, everything he never said. Because in that gesture lies discipline, and discipline is what the average man lacks. And this gesture isn't a shout, nor a punishment. It's a retreat. It's the silent surrender of someone who knows that value lies in those who choose to stay, not in those who beg to remain. It's then that she realizes he's not trying to teach her anything. He's simply following his own code. And this code, even invisible, is more powerful than any speech. The code is what defines a man's structure, and structure is what most attracts a woman, even if she'll never admit it. You don't need to threaten. You don't need to explain. You don't need to fight. You just need to leave, and truly leave, without leaving a trace, without asking for anything back, without making her aware of your absence with words. Because when the absence is real, she feels it without you saying anything. And it's this silence that creates the echo that never stops beating inside her, even when everything seems normal on the outside. This is the first principle of silent magnetism. Don't try to convince. Show what happens when she loses you. And show it with silence, not speech. Silence used well carries more emotional weight than any beautiful text. Silence is what transforms a simple goodbye into a traumatic memory. Every time a man reacts emotionally, he gives away his center. Every time a man explains himself, he lowers his value. But when he calmly retreats, he becomes unforgettable. Because his absence isn't an act of pride, it's a mirror. And in that mirror, she sees the reflection of her own mistake. And mistake, when reflected upon without judgment, turns into pain. A silent pain. A pain that has no one to blame. She may laugh at first, pretend she doesn't care, create distractions. But time asks questions the ego can't answer. And little by little, the absence begins to weigh on her. Not out of need, but out of contrast. Because she feels the absence exactly where she felt control. And now, without control, all that's left is emptiness. The man who disappeared wasn't just anyone. He was the one she couldn't catch. And that's when she starts to wonder, did he go back to someone from the past? Did he find someone else? Was I just another one? Did he even think about me after that? This kind of doubt doesn't arise with men who explain themselves. Only with those who disappear. Only with those who end cycles without words. Only with those who leave more questions than answers. And unanswered questions are emotional holes, spaces that time doesn't easily close. And when you understand this, you change the game forever. You stop seeking love as a reward and start building value as a foundation. And value isn't built with persistence. It's built with absence, with silence, with standards, with firmness. She may even like you when you're there, but she'll only truly value you when she feels you could leave at any moment. And more, that you would leave without guilt, without anger, without longing. That your life goes on with or without her. That you didn't stop for her. That you didn't beg to stay. This is the invisible terror. Because in that moment, she realizes the tables have turned. That you're no longer trying to win her over. You're just following your path. And maybe she's no longer on it. And when she realizes this, something changes inside her. The lightness with which she treated your presence turns into heaviness. And this heaviness doesn't come from outside. It comes from within. From the knowledge that she's lost something she can't replace. You then become a presence that persists even after you're gone. An idea that can't be undone. An absence that generates more impact than any noisy presence. A symbol of what it means to have limits. An emotional reminder that not everything is negotiable. This is the silent power. It's the strength that doesn't scream. It's the choice to be unforgettable, not through insistence, but through discipline, emotional discipline. A standard of value, clarity of purpose, and at that moment you don't need to do anything else. Because she's the one who will try to understand, and everything that isn't understood is desired. Everything that isn't understood is repeated mentally. Everything that isn't understood lives in the unconscious. But all of this only works if it's real, if your absence is genuine, if your decision is firm, if you know that your worth doesn't depend on anyone's validation, if you have the courage to withdraw and remain withdrawn. This is the beginning. And it's not about manipulation, it's about pattern. The human mind responds to contrast. What is rare leaves a mark. What is constant dissolves. And what dissolves is forgotten. But what leaves a mark remains. And a man who knows how to disappear with honor, she won't forget him, no matter the time, no matter the distance, no matter what comes next. This is the first foundation of invisible presence, and it only begins when you finally stop chasing love and begins to construct the kind of absence that transforms silence into memory, emotional memory, deep memory, memory that doesn't fade. But what if she comes back? What if she reaches out to you after this silence? Should you accept it? Should you ignore it? Or should you double down and use this to dig even deeper into her mind? This is where things start to get more dangerous. And in the next part, you'll understand why what she sees in you matters more than what you really are, and how Machiavelli predicted this centuries before modern psychology. She doesn't love the truth. She loves the image. And whoever controls that image controls everything. You may be kind, loyal, profound, intelligent. You may be the most upstanding man she's ever met. But if your image doesn't communicate that, none of it matters. Because what she feels when she's in front of you comes before what she thinks about you. And that's where most men lose. We believe that being authentic is enough, that being sincere, truthful, and honest is enough. But the truth is more uncomfortable. No one responds to their essence before responding to their presence. And your presence isn't who you are, it's how you appear. Machiavelli once said, "It's not necessary to be good. It's necessary to appear good." The phrase sounds harsh, almost cynical, but it's an accurate description of how the human brain processes reality. We don't live the truth. We live the perception of truth. Appearance isn't superficial. Appearance is the filter that defines how the world will react to you. And when we talk about attraction, this intensifies. Because desire isn't born from logic. Desire is born from impact. The first thing she feels isn't your content. It's your vibration, your tone, your gaze, your presence. The way you enter a room, the way you fall silent after a question, the way you hold your body when challenged. And all of this happens before you even say the first word. Think about how many times you've seen a woman lose interest in a man who was nice but insecure, a nice guy but who conveyed anxiety, an interesting man but who seemed to be trying to convince. And worst of all, often she herself can't explain why. She just feels like something is missing. It's because what was missing wasn't essence, it was structure. It was impact, it was image. And image in the emotional context isn't aesthetics, it's presence. Presence is what you communicate even when you're not speaking. And this communication is what defines the value it attributes to you. She won't remember everything you said, but she will remember how you made her feel. And what makes someone feel something is the subtle combination of posture, pause, energy, and what's left unsaid. What's left unsaid especially carries a power most men ignore, because a well-placed silence carries more weight than 1,000 words desperate for attention. Have you ever noticed how some men walk into a room and are immediately noticed? They're not talking loudly, they're not being arrogant, they just exist clearly. They're aligned, they're aware, and this awareness generates a kind of invisible gravity. Now think about the opposite. That guy who's kind, hardworking, and attentive, but carries a heavy energy, an anxiety, a weariness, a desperate desire for validation. Even without saying anything, he conveys that he's there trying to be chosen. And this attempt is noticed. And once noticed, it's rejected. Women's instincts have been trained for thousands of years to detect inconsistency. They may not understand it rationally, but they feel it. And when they sense that the image doesn't match the words, something in them switches off. They may even continue smiling. They may even continue responding. But internally, the spell is broken. Therefore, the basis of your image isn't what you say. It's what you maintain. It's how at peace you are with who you are. It's how much you can remain silent in the face of provocation. It's how much your body posture conveys that you don't need to prove anything. Machiavelli would say that power lies in controlling how others perceive you. And this isn't achieved through manipulation. It's achieved through structure. The silent structure of a man who has clear values, firm boundaries, and is unafraid of judgment. Because those who fear judgment act, but those who are at peace simply appear. And this true, effortless, and anxiety-free appearance communicates power. You don't need to appear better than you are. You need to appear as strong as you truly are. And to do that, it's not enough to have value. You need to know how to convey that value. You need to know how to communicate without selling yourself short. Because if you try to convince, you lose. And if you try to explain, you diminish the impact. In a world where everyone talks too much, silence has become a symbol of power. And the man who understands this uses silence as an instrument of dominance. He observes more than he comments. He responds with presence. He's not trying to make an impression. He's comfortable being a doubter, because he knows that doubt breeds attraction, and excessive certainty kills mystery. She doesn't want to understand you. She wants to feel something she herself can't explain. And that kind of feeling isn't born from what you reveal. It's born from what you keep hidden. That's why the man who knows how to control his own image always leaves a piece of himself behind his eyes. He never gives himself completely. He never reveals himself completely. Because he understands that what keeps desire burning is what hasn't yet been revealed. This applies to everything. The way you walk up to her, the way you hold her gaze, the way you listen unhurriedly, the way you dismiss a personal question with a light, guilt-free smile. It's these small choices that create the unconscious narrative of power. And the more you understand this, the more you realize that the world doesn't reward those who are pure. The world rewards those who know how to control their own narrative. And the narrative isn't what you say, it's what you represent. You represent control when you don't react. You represent value when you don't try to justify yourself. You represent strength when you don't try to appear strong. Now, imagine a simple scenario. A casual encounter. You're standing in front of her. She makes a provocation, something subtle but intentional, a test. Most men would react with justification, an attempt to lighten the mood, a search for approval. But the man who dominates her image just smiles. He doesn't respond. He doesn't play along. And this silence disarms her, because she expected control, and what she received was presence. Another example. She asks a personal question about your past. You can answer. You can open up. You can show that you have nothing to hide. But the impact lies in gently refusing, in saying, "Some stories are better left unexplained," and then smiling and continuing. This simple choice completely alters the emotional landscape of the moment, because now she's curious. And curiosity is the gateway to obsession. You're not playing games, you're choosing what to show. And that's not manipulation, it's preservation, because the value she sees in you is directly linked to how much she feels she hasn't seen it all yet. This is the secret to a powerful image. It's not created, it's constructed, with posture, with silence, with boundaries, with presence, with emotional mastery, with the ability to sustain discomfort without losing center. And she feels it, even if she can never explain it. That's why so many men who possess substance, kindness, even beauty, are still forgotten, because they don't understand that substance only has an impact when it's loaded with structure. Wine can be noble, but if the bottle is dirty, no one tastes it. You need to protect your image not with effort, but with alignment. Not by striving to appear as something you're not, but by committing to not letting your essence be diluted by anxiety, haste, or the need for approval. And when you adopt this stance, something changes around you. People treat you differently. Looks change. The tone of conversations shift. Because everyone, consciously or unconsciously, respects the man who respects himself first. And this image, once built with discipline, becomes your greatest asset. Because it precedes you. It enters the room before you speak. It makes its presence felt even when you leave. And when she realizes she can't read you anymore, that's when everything starts to change. In the next part, you'll understand why being unpredictable isn't instability. It's strategy, and how the combination of power and cunning transforms you into something she can't control, but also can't forget. She never tests what you say. She tests what you stand for. And that's the flaw 99% of men face. They believe they lost a woman because they made a mistake in something they said. But the truth is rarely in what they say. The truth is in the reaction. in how you behave when she breaks the rhythm, changes tone, distances herself, provokes, or silences you. The test is never stated, but it's inevitable. Every woman, consciously or unconsciously, will test you, not out of malice, not because she wants to see you fail, but because she needs to know where your structure ends. And she won't ask. She'll provoke, she'll contradict, she'll shut down for no reason. She'll act cold after an intense night. She'll say she wants space when the game seemed won. And in that moment, every man reveals his true core. Are you the kind of man who breaks? The kind who tries to fix? The kind who argues? The kind who begs? The kind who tries to explain to be understood? Or are you the kind of man who observes, remains silent, and keeps his structure intact? Machiavelli said that a powerful man must be like both the lion and the fox. The lion commands respect. The fox avoids traps. But the common mistake is trying to be one or the other. Strength without intelligence becomes arrogance. Cunning without poise becomes cowardice. Only the union of the two creates the kind of presence she cannot predict, and everything that cannot be predicted fascinates. Stop and think. How many times have you seen a man give in at the very moment he needed to maintain silence? How many times have you seen a man react angrily when he needed to maintain his center? How many times have you seen a man want dialogue when what he really wanted was to feel the weight of absence? And the most curious thing, why do so many men feel obliged to respond immediately every time they are challenged? The answer lies in the emotional addiction to seeking validation, the male anxiety to be understood, the childish fear of appearing indifferent. But true respect never comes from explanation. It comes from the realization that you don't need to be explained, that you are. And that's what changes everything. Imagine she says bluntly, "Maybe this won't work between us." What do? If you try to convince, you lose. If you justify yourself, you weaken yourself. But if you smile, say "okay," and stay silent, you transfer the emotional weight of the choice to her. Because now she's the one who has to deal with the lack of resistance. Have you ever wondered why silence at certain times hurts more than any answer? It's because well-placed silence activates the emotional mirror. It makes her look at herself. And in that gaze, she finds doubts, guilt, fear, memories. The man who understands this masters the rhythm of the bond. He doesn't force reconnection. He creates the space for her to want to return. The lion manifests itself in firmness, in the way you impose limits without shouting, in the way you disappear without warning when you feel disrespected. The fox appears in precision, in reading between the lines, in the time you wait before acting, in the way you observe everything but reveal little. But how do you know if you're being the right lion? And how do you know if you're being the fox at the right time? This is the question that separates the instinctive from the strategic. The instinctive man reacts on impulse. The strategic man responds by reading. And to read, you need to observe more than you speak. You need to listen to what she doesn't say. You need to notice what changes in her body when you don't react. A simple example. She makes a cold comment. You feel the impact. You want to defend yourself. You want to tell her she's being unfair, but you hold back. Breathe, observe, change your gaze, and say nothing. At that exact moment, her emotional state shifts, because now she feels the difference between a man who reacts and a man who understands. And that's not a game, that's presence. Another example. She talks about another man, casually, almost innocently, but the tone is calculated. She wants to see your reaction. She wants to know if you're afraid, if you're shaken. You can fall into the trap, ask questions, show jealousy, or you can smile calmly, change the subject, and look at her as if you already know what's behind it. In this gesture, you show that you're not competing, because you know she only tests those who fear losing. How many times have you responded too quickly? Have you justified things that didn't even need explaining? Have you ever put yourself down just to keep the conversation going? Now, imagine doing the opposite. Imagine maintaining silence. Imagine backing away without drama. Imagine leaving her alone with the gesture itself, the discomfort it generates, the tension it creates, the psychological effect it triggers. That's what deep bonds are born from. You don't win her over by saying what she wants to hear. You win her over by being the man she can't predict. And to do that, you need to become imperturbable. Not like a rock that doesn't feel, but like a river that flows with intelligence. Machiavelli would understand this metaphor. He knew that power lies not in brute force, but in the ability to act with precision. A right blow at the right time is worth more than 1,000 words spoken at the wrong moment. And when it comes to attraction, timing is everything. A woman only respects a man who doesn't lose his temper, a man she can't control emotionally, not because he's cold, but because he's firm. Because he knows that losing his composure means losing control of the narrative. Have you ever lost control of the narrative because you talk too much? Have you ever noticed that the more you explain, the more it gets away from you? Over-explaining is a form of weakness disguised as openness. Because deep down, the man who needs to explain everything is trying to stay within her zone of acceptance. But the man who masters the dynamic knows he doesn't need to fit in. He knows that presence can't be begged for. It can be imposed. You impose your presence with the pause, with the silence, with the decision not to chase, with the wisdom of letting her feel the effects of her own choice. And when you do, something changes inside her. Because now she's no longer in control. She's in the void. And the emptiness, when it comes from a man she wanted to dominate, turns into fascination. Because she feels what she doesn't understand. And everything that can't be understood sticks. You need to become a question mark, not for cheap mystery, but for true depth. And depth isn't complexity. It's clarity. It's the clarity that you don't give in out of insecurity, that you don't surrender out of anxiety, that you're willing to walk away even when you love someone if you feel you're being disrespected. This kind of strength isn't learned from books. It's built in silence. In the moments when you hold back the urge to justify yourself. In the seconds when you choose to observe instead of respond. On the nights when you feel her absence but choose not to text. Have you ever chosen silence even though you missed him? Have you ever endured his absence even though your heart was racing? If so, you are close to mastering something that few men know, the power of non-reaction. When you don't react, you create space. And in that space, she begins to project herself. She begins to question herself. She begins to remember what you didn't say. She begins to imagine what you thought. And that pulls her in. Because now she's not dealing with you. She's dealing with the version of you she created. And that version is more powerful than any argument you could give. This is the secret to unpredictability. It's making her never know if you'll stay or go, if you'll respond or remain silent, if you'll accept or disappear. And this emotional imbalance generates desire, because she can't control you. And what you can't control, you desire more. You don't need to provoke. You just need to maintain your structure while chaos tries to bend you. And chaos will come. It will test you. It will provoke you. It will try to throw you off center. And how you respond defines everything. If you master this, she'll never see you the same way again. Because now you're no longer an ordinary man. You're a presence that can't be explained. You're a code that can't be deciphered. And when she feels she doesn't have you completely, she begins to desire even your absences. She begins to desire your silence. She begins to respect what she previously ignored. Because now, your every gesture carries weight. Because you've made it clear, without saying it, that you're not there to be chosen. You're there to be respected. In the next part, you'll discover what happens when you start dividing her emotional core. When she no longer knows whether she loves what she feels, or hates not being able to control it. It's the beginning of the invisible war. The war that rages inside her mind, and which you won before it even began. You don't have to change her mind, just make her start to doubt it. This is one of the oldest psychological laws of power, and also one of the least understood. Most men try to convince, argue, prove, defend. They think they need to win the debate to earn respect. But respect isn't born from the strength of the argument. It's born from the subtlety of doubt. And this doubt doesn't begin when you argue. It begins when you speak little. When you say a single sentence seemingly light but loaded with ambiguity. When you leave an idea hanging in the air that she can't fit into her own mental map. And that idea, by not fitting, begins to slowly erode what she believed to be true. Machiavelli understood this. He knew that divide and conquer wasn't just a military strategy, but also an emotional one. A divided kingdom is easier to control, and a divided mind is easier to influence. When it begins to question itself internally, you don't need to pressure it externally. It destabilizes itself. Consider a common situation. She says she doesn't like jealous men. Most men would respond with approval or justification. But the man who understands the game simply smiles and says, "That's what you think." Nothing more. No irony. No accusatory tone. Just a loose sentence that creates a rift. Now she'll think about that answer for hours, maybe days. She'll wonder what you meant. She'll replay past situations. She'll question whether she's even right about what she feels. And here's the secret. Doubt doesn't push you away. Doubt brings you closer. Because doubt creates tension. And emotional tension is what keeps someone hooked on a narrative. What keeps someone coming back to a movie is the mystery, not the answer. And her mind works the same way. When she feels like she doesn't know exactly who you are or what you think, she comes back. She investigates, she imagines, she connects. Have you ever noticed how the most memorable stories aren't the ones that answer everything, but the ones that leave open questions? The same thing happens to you. If you answer everything, if you give everything away, if you over-explain, you become predictable. And predictability is emotionally disposable. But if you leave gaps, if you leave silences, if you leave pauses that she can't interpret, you become emotionally inexhaustible. This strategy is even more powerful when combined with another truth about the human brain. It hates contradiction. The technical term for this is cognitive dissonance. When someone's mind encounters two ideas that don't fit, it tries to resolve them. And until it resolves, it keeps thinking. And this constant thinking is what keeps it attached to you. Let's look at a real-life example. In a psychological study of over 200 women, it was found that most of them were more attracted to men whose opinion of them was uncertain. The group that believed the men thought they were okay thought less about them than the group that didn't know whether they were being approved or rejected. Mystery generated more engagement than direct praise. This explains why so many men who over-compliment lose ground. Not because the compliment itself is bad, but because it solves the mystery. It closes the narrative, and what's resolved ceases to be urgent. But when you deliver contradictory signals, an intense presence one day, absolute silence the next, you activate this internal search system. She needs to understand. She needs to interpret. And in the process, she begins to connect emotionally. Now imagine she says, "I find it strange that you're so secretive." The average man would respond with apologies or try to open up. But the man who understands the value of mystery might say, "Some things only make sense when they're discovered." This sentence doesn't explain. It invites. It doesn't justify. It instigates. And most importantly, it shifts curiosity to her side. Now she needs to pursue it. She needs to discover what's behind the silence. And silence, when it seems to contain something valuable, becomes an obsession. Have you ever noticed how some people get attached to others who weren't even that present? It's because what holds you back isn't presence. It's doubt. It's the feeling that something important has been left open. And when you learn to intentionally leave loose ends, you leave traces in her mind, little enigmas, fragments of conversations, unexplained glances, pauses that seem to contain a greater truth. And all of this creates an internal scenario in which she begins to struggle with herself. She feels one thing, but thinks another. She believes in something, but begins to question it. She feels secure, but feels insecure. And this internal division transforms desire into fixation. Machiavelli wouldn't win the debate. He would win the silence that followed. He wouldn't convince you with logic. He would destabilize you with doubt, and you would do the rest yourself. Because that's how true influence works. It's not imposed, it's felt. It's the discomfort that grows within those who thought they were in control. Let's look at another real-life situation. Imagine she tells you about an ex, and you notice admiration in the details. The average man would try to put on a better face. He would try to overcome the ghost of the past with words. But the strategic man doesn't compete. He calmly says, "He seems to have left an impact. But I usually leave a different kind." And then he changes the subject. You're not competing. You're creating contrast. And contrast is what she'll remember. Neuroscience studies show that the brain best records what breaks patterns. If you respond like everyone else, it forgets. But if you say something it's never heard before, something that breaks the rhythm, it sticks. It sticks because it sets off the attention alarm. It sticks because the mind loves the unexpected. So you don't have to say much. You just have to say enough to ignite something she can't extinguish herself. And that something, more often than not, is an unanswered question. What if everything she thinks about herself is wrong? This is the most powerful doubt. When you provoke this question within her, you're not just creating attraction, you're creating transformation. She begins to revise beliefs, to reevaluate memories, to question convictions. And all this because of a phrase, a gesture, a silence from you. And here's the key point. Her mind doesn't know you're doing this. She just senses that you're different, that your presence generates movement, that your silence provokes internal noise. And she returns to this. Even unintentionally, she returns, because the brain seeks coherence. And where there is emotional incoherence, there is a search. Have you ever noticed how some people get stuck in short but intense moments? It's because emotional impact isn't proportional to time. It's proportional to depth. And depth isn't saying more. It's saying what no one else had the courage to say. It's pointing out the detail that went unnoticed. It's touching on the point everyone avoids, but doing it calmly, without force, without attacking, with elegance. When you develop this skill, you become an architect of doubt, a sower of questions, a mirror that shows what she didn't want to see. And this image, even uncomfortable, becomes unforgettable, because she's not used to being seen this way. She's used to being pleased, to being validated, to being protected from herself. But when she encounters someone who confronts her with lightness, she feels something she can't name, and what is not named remains. This is the basis of psychological control, not telling her who she is, but making her question herself. Not confronting her ideas, but creating small cracks. Not engaging in conflict, but igniting internal chaos. And doing this without losing her center, without losing her composure, without losing her elegance. You're not attacking, you're exposing. And what's calmly expressed has more impact than what's shouted loudly. Now imagine what happens when, in addition to dividing her mind, you disappear. When you plant doubt and retreat. When you leave her alone with her own thoughts. It's like dropping a bomb and leaving the room, not to hurt, but to let the effect spread. And this effect expands, because she begins to see you in the pauses of the day, in the silences of thought, in the memories she can't control. You become a silent presence, an open code, a symbol, and symbols have more power than facts. You don't want to be remembered for the answers you gave. You want to be remembered for the questions you left. In the next part, you'll understand how to combine this tension with emotional reinforcement, how to reward with precision, punish with silence, and turn your presence into an emotional system she can't let go of. You don't have to be the most handsome, the funniest, or the smartest. You have to be the man who truly saw her. And he said it at the right moment, in the simplest way, with such a calm tone that she had no way to defend herself. Because the truth, spoken with presence, hurts more than any criticism delivered in anger. And when the truth comes without the intention of attack, but simply as an observation, it cannot be ignored. This is where most men fail. They want to get inside her body, but what really changes the game is getting inside her mind. And to do that, you don't need to conquer. You need to observe, silently, patiently, precisely. Because when you see something in her that no one else has seen, and calmly name it, you break the emotional pattern she's used to repeating. She may be admired every day. She may receive compliments from all sides. She may have hundreds of unread messages. But still, she's never been lightly unmasked. She's never been seen beyond her appearance, her control, her performance. And that's where you come in. You don't try to impress. You don't try to seduce. You just observe. And at some point, after an exaggerated laugh, a rehearsed phrase, a mechanical gesture, you simply say, "You smile, but you look tired." Or, "That answer of yours doesn't seem honest." Or, "It seems like you're trying to protect yourself from something you don't even know what it is." And after that, silence. No explanation, no elaboration, no correction. Because the impact isn't in what you say, it's in how she feels when you say it. And it's also in how she feels when you don't add to it. Because silence after the truth carries a weight that words can't carry. It's the emptiness of a conclusion that didn't come, of an analysis that wasn't completed, of a narrative that was left hanging. She might even deny it. You might say it's okay, you might laugh, you might change the subject. But inside her something broke. And what broke wasn't her ego, it was her armor. Because in that moment she felt she wasn't in control, that she'd been noticed. And being noticed without being prepared for it is the most intimate moment anyone can experience. It's the moment when social roles fail and the human being emerges. Naked, unscripted, unposed, human. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever felt seen by someone who didn't judge you or praise you but just saw you? Who simply saw you without trying to change, correct, or interfere? That's how she feels. But she won't show it. Not right away. She'll hide it. She'll run away. She'll try to act normal. She'll smile as if nothing had happened. But later, alone, she'll think. She'll repeat the phrase. She'll remember your tone. She'll remember your look. She'll remember the silence later. She'll start to see you differently. Because now you're no longer just a presence. You're a reflection. You showed her something that was hidden, something that even she didn't want to admit. And this kind of connection doesn't dissolve over time, because it's not rational. It's visceral. It wasn't created by effort, it was caused by presence. And true presence is one of the rarest forces in the world. Rarer than beauty, rarer than intelligence, rarer than status. Because true presence requires an absence of ego. And almost no one is willing to give that up. Most people live distracted. They talk too much. They think about what they're going to say while the other person is talking. They act automatically. They chase answers. But the person who learns to listen with their eyes, their body, and their soul carries something that no one understands, but everyone feels. That's why, when you say the right thing at the right time, you make an impact. Because you say what no one else had the courage to say. And because you say it without attacking, without trying to win, without expecting anything in return. You simply deliver the vision, and then you shut up. This is the difference between a man who pleases and a man who exposes. The former is forgotten. The latter lives in her mind for a long time, even if he never returns. Because pleasing is common, but exposing with ease is art. A rare, silent, and powerful art. Now imagine combining this exposure with disappearance. Imagine saying the right thing and then disappearing. Imagine leaving that mirror open. No resolution, no turning back, no sequence. This is how you plant an emotional symbol inside her. A symbol she can't erase. Because the symbol isn't you. It's what you saw in her. She starts thinking about you at the most unlikely times. When she hears something similar. When someone compliments her smile. When she tries to smile again. When someone repeats the same phrase. When she's alone and realizes she's faking it to herself. Because the memory of your phrase doesn't fade. It lingers like an echo. An emotional echo that says, "Someone saw something I hid, and what was seen can no longer be invisible." The mind tries to erase it, but the body remembers. And the body responds with tension, with longing, with sensations that have no name. And this remains. Have you ever stopped to think how many people she knows who actually see her? Not her body, not her style, not her persona, but her pain, her emptiness, her contradiction, her fear. Almost no one sees that. And even fewer have the courage to name it. So when someone does it calmly, without vanity, without any intention of control, she doesn't know how to react. She doesn't react, she feels. And what is felt with this depth becomes emotional memory. Emotional memory is the hardest to erase. Because it isn't stored logically, it's stored in the body, in the nervous system, in subtle triggers, in the breathing that changes when something reminds her of you, in single words, in gestures she repeated to hide. And now, every silence you give her weighs heavily. Every time you don't respond, she feels it. Every time you calmly appear, she remembers. Because you're no longer just a man. You're the point where she lost control, and the point where someone truly saw her. And she knows it, even if she doesn't say it. This is worth more than any achievement, because achievement fades over time, but what touches identity remains. It remains because it wasn't a choice. It was a shock. It was a revelation. Have you ever been that point for someone? Have you ever stopped being a presence and become a mirror? If so, you know this changes everything. Because from that moment on, you no longer need to seek attention. You become a reference, a presence that lives in the other person's unconscious. And every time something similar happens in their life, they remember you, like a silent thread connecting the past to the present, like a fragment that doesn't dissolve. And what do you do with it? Nothing. You don't use, you don't manipulate, you don't try to take advantage. Because true power isn't an exploitation, it's an existing clearly. You become a line in her emotional timeline, and she knows that, after you, something changed. Even if it wasn't said, even if you never see each other again, even if she tells everyone you were just another one. This is psychological mastery, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. It's not strength, it's depth. It's not performance, it's presence. You may be the man who made her laugh, travel, and experience incredible moments, but none of that compares to the man who made her stop, think, reflect, and see herself from a perspective she'd never considered before, a perspective she might never consider again, a breaking point. And it all begins with a single choice. Stop trying to be accepted, start observing, and name, accurately and calmly, what's hidden. What she herself hid so well she no longer knew it was there. That's why most men can't do this, because they still want something in return. They're still afraid of rejection. They still strive to please. But the man who transcends this phase understands that value lies in what he sees and what he refuses to negotiate. The man who knows how to see and walk away is the one who endures. Have you ever seen something in her that no one else has seen? If so, keep it, and say it at the right moment. Just once, lightly, then disappear. Because when you combine vision with absence, you are no longer a man. You become an indelible memory, an emotional anchor, a symbol of lucidity. And this memory doesn't depend on proximity. It doesn't depend on physical presence. She may be with someone else, she may be far away. She may move on with her life, but she will remember. She will remember because what you caused was stronger than any image. You caused transformation. You weren't the best. You were the most real. You were the most present. You were the calmest in the face of truth. And that kind of presence doesn't fade. And when a real man enters the life of someone who lived among masks, the mark is eternal. In the next part, you'll understand how to use silence even more strategically, not just as absence, but as control. How to disappear with precision, how to become not an end, but an active void within her, an absence that makes her question everything, including herself. Disappearing is easy. The hard part is disappearing with meaning. Most men walk away out of pride, pain, or disappointment. But when they return, nothing has changed, because their absence had no structure. It was just an escape. It was just an emotional reaction. What differentiates the common man from the man who masters his own absence is intention. Structured absence is strategy, and strategic absence is power. It's not about cutting off contact to get attention. It's about withdrawing with clarity, with discipline, with a silence that speaks louder than 1,000 words. And this silence only has an impact if it's preceded by true presence, by clear boundaries, by a firm vision of who you are. Absence is only powerful when its presence has value, and this value doesn't come from pleasing. It comes from being, from effortlessly showing that you have an inner world so solid that you don't need to shout to be heard. When you disappear, she doesn't miss what you said. She misses what you represented, and that's what makes you unforgettable. because most men disappear to punish. But the man who understands the power of absence disappears to teach, not with anger, with silence. Have you ever thought about how many times you've stood where you weren't respected? How many times have you accepted less than you deserved, afraid of losing someone? How many times have you explained yourself to someone who had already decided not to listen? That's where transformation begins. When you understand that it's not your job to convince anyone of your worth. It's your responsibility to simply live that value so clearly that it becomes non-negotiable. And when you do, your absence becomes a mirror. It looks at the place where you were, and instead of finding emptiness, finds its own awareness. Because you didn't leave with screams or attacks. You left with determination. And determination, when silent, becomes a ghost. You don't need to remind her that you're absent, she'll feel it. Because the contrast between your presence and absence was so clear. You were whole, now you're gone. And that break is what holds her back. Not because she's lost you, but because she doesn't know if she can get you back. Have you ever truly disappeared? Have you ever disappeared not to hide, but to reassert yourself? Have you ever chosen silence even though you had something to say? Have you ever withdrawn even though you loved, just because you understood that staying would be a betrayal of yourself? If you've ever done this, you know there's no greater power than walking in the opposite direction of desire when your dignity is at stake. Because desire passes, conscience remains. And it's with a clear conscience that you build a new kind of value. A value that doesn't depend on her reaction. A value that arises from you. And that value is what shapes everything. Because absence, when it comes from someone valuable, doesn't just generate longing. It generates transformation. It generates rethinking. It generates doubt. It generates fear. Fear of never finding anyone like you again. Fear of never feeling so seen again. Fear that the most sincere version of her has left with you. This isn't manipulation. It's a consequence. It's the natural effect of someone who lived deeply and then left with awareness. But how do you apply this in a real way? How do you turn this idea into practical action in your daily life? With the people you surround yourself with. The first step is simple, but painful. Start observing where you're being ignored, where you're being tolerated but not admired, where your presence has become routine, and stop insisting on those places. Whether in relationships, friendships, or fleeting connections, you need to learn to read the value being attributed to you. And when you realize you're being underestimated, keep quiet. Don't complain. Don't demand. Don't justify yourself. Just walk away, but withdraw with structure. This means not acting impulsively. It means withdrawing calmly, with clarity, with a firmness that doesn't require explanation. Your absence should be felt as a decision, not a tantrum. At the same time, learn to build true presence. This begins long before absence. It begins with the way you position yourself, the way you speak, the way you maintain your boundaries. Presence isn't about being close, it's about being whole. When you're with someone, be there completely. Listen deeply, observe carefully, speak with intention, look calmly, because it's this presence that will make your absence memorable. And without a real presence, absence is irrelevant. Then comes the hardest test, maintaining silence. Most men fail here. They hold out for 2 days, 3, then they come back. They text, they try to reconnect. But the true power of absence only emerges when it's sustained with discipline. When you allow time to do the work your words couldn't. This requires emotional strength. It requires confidence. It requires self-focus. So during this period, invest in yourself. Reinforce your routine, your discipline, your mental clarity. Make her absence your time to rebuild. And when, or if, she returns, you won't be the same. You'll be bigger, quieter, more centered, harder to reach. And that's what changes the dynamic forever. Because now she's no longer dealing with the man who gave in. She's dealing with the man who walked away and outlived himself. That's the real impact. You don't come back the same. And because you don't come back the same, she can't treat you the same way either. And if she tries, you won't stay. Because now you feel your own worth in your body. It's no longer theory. It's reality. It lives in your silence. It's tattooed in your absence. This is the end of the cycle, but it's also the beginning of a new way of experiencing relationships, a way where you no longer seek to be loved. You seek to be whole, and whoever wants to be with you must conform to your standards, not the other way around. You may be wondering, but what if she doesn't come back? What if her absence isn't felt? If this happens, it's because your presence had no impact, and that's not a cause for grief. It's a given, a diagnosis, a mirror. It serves to show you that the work isn't about forcing connection. The work is about elevating your presence until absence becomes unbearable. This requires reconstruction. It requires clarity. It requires the humility to start over. But it also requires courage. Courage to stop begging for what should be offered. Courage to walk alone for a while. Courage to trust that the right silence is worth more than 1,000 failed attempts. You don't need techniques. You need structure. You need patterns. You need presence and absence, both with purpose, both with value. And above all, you need to understand that in this game, the man who wins isn't the one who conquers the most. It's the one who remains the hardest to forget. That's your role. To become unforgettable, not through performance but through impact, not through quantity but through depth, not through what you give but through what you represent. You represent the silence that speaks, the absence that teaches, the presence that transforms. This is the end of the video, but it could be the beginning of your transformation. If this content touched you in any way, if something here made you think or remember something you experienced, make it a commitment, not just a reflection. Comment below with your experience, your question, or even an anonymous report, if you prefer. This space is yours, and your story could be the beginning of clarity for another man too. Subscribe to the Deep Psyche channel now. Activate the bell and like this video so more people can hear this message. Your click isn't just support, it's an act of expansion. And remember, the man who learns to use silence as a weapon never again begs for love. He commands respect without having to say a word. Are you ready to become that man? So see you in the next video.